Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Today I am joined by some very special leaders in our city. Our Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Aviation. We have Mr. Michael McMurray. We also have our Choose Chicago President and CEO, Kristen Reynolds. And I'm also joined by our Deputy Mayor of Business, Economic, and Neighborhood Development, Deputy Mayor Kenya Merritt. I just want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear about why it's important that we continue to drive violent crime down in the city of Chicago. It's my top priority. It's something that is always top of mind for me. In order for us to have a vibrant city, we have to have a safe city. All of you all know, and the people of Chicago know, it's my goal to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. And we are well on our way of accomplishing that feat. And in this moment, as you'll see, there are clear signs and indications that we are moving in the right direction. But I do want to acknowledge something, though. There was a social media debate last week over the weekend of the top 4 cities in the United States of America. And as you can see, that there were many different comments here, of which some of them did not even put Chicago in the top 4, which is pretty shocking, and quite frankly, I find it to be appalling. So what I've decided to do is just give people an opportunity to end this debate once and for all. The top 4 cities in America, let's start with the first one, Chicago. Thank you very much. But I also want to talk about, last week, which was really a perfect testament to the greatness of our city. We hosted the Premier League games, the doubleheader. It was just an amazing turnout, 50,000 folks from all over the world. We had the Fiesta del Sol. We announced that the All-Star Game of 2027 is coming to Chicago, and we had literally the best Lollapalooza that we've ever had. I think a lot of people were really impressed with what they saw with Lolla in particular. We're still waiting on some of the final numbers, but we saw upwards of 115,000 attendees every single day, the fewest arrests that we've seen. Now, that doesn't happen without the coordination between OEMC, CPD, CFD, and all of our departments who work together to keep all of our people safe. The scale and the coordination were truly a testament to our city workers. But let me now pass it over to someone who is working incredibly hard to bring more large events and visitors to our city. She has hit the ground running in her new role, and I think we already are seeing the expertise that she brings to this position. So please welcome for the first time at one of these briefings, our true CEO President, Kristen Reynolds.
Thank you so much, Mayor Johnson, Deputy Mayor Merritt, and Commissioner McMurray for inviting me today for your leadership and your partnership and your support of Chicago's tourism industry. Chicago's tourism industry is a key economic generator and job creator. In 2024, the visitor economy generated more than $20 billion in local spending and is responsible for more than 130,000 local jobs across all 77 neighborhoods. We're coming off a very strong 2024, and the tourism industry globally has faced many economic and social challenges in 2025. However, thanks to an aggressive and strategic approach to prioritize and invest in our tourism industry, Chicago is continuing to grow, both in tourism demand and spending. So to date, Chicago is up almost 5% in RevPAR. RevPAR is revenue per available room, and that's when you combine occupancy and average daily rate. As far as international visitation goes, we are down in Canada and Mexico. However, overall, internationally, Chicago is up year to date. And that's primarily because of tremendous growth that we're seeing in other international markets, including Colombia, Spain, Japan, and Italy. We're coming off a landmark weekend, as the mayor said, where Lollapalooza attracted record-breaking crowds and came on the heels of the Premier League and the announcement that we're going to host the 2027 Major League Baseball All-Star Game at Wrigley Field. Choose Chicago recently announced our new marketing campaign, Never Done and Never Outdone. This speaks to our city's continued commitment to evolution, innovation, our unmatched work ethic, and our desire to compete and win. And when Chicago competes, we do win, as we can see from today's information and from last weekend. Last year, Chicago's hotel tax revenue increased by $18 million, generating more than $157 million for our city in 2024, and we are currently on pace to top those numbers in 2025. There is tremendous momentum in our city right now, and our biggest challenge is finding the resources to accommodate all of the requests that we're receiving. Chicago is in high demand, but we can't let our foot off the pedal. We are booking conventions and events currently through 2040. So what we do today definitely has implications on our city's success for years to come. And we all know that business attraction and relocation, it all starts with a visit. So when people are exposed to our city, just like they were last weekend, almost 500,000 people, it's impossible not to fall in love with Chicago. But we have to continue to push forward. If we prioritize and invest in our visitor economy, we will set our city up for success for future generations to come. So I want to thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and welcome Commissioner McMurray to the podium to talk about the great things happening at the airports. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Mayor Johnson. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Merritt, for having me here today to talk a little bit about some of the great numbers that are coming out from our airport system. I want to thank, of course, my entire CDA team, the fantastic job that we're doing at both O'Hare and Midway International Airports. And so what I'm going to do is give you guys a bunch of numbers here to talk about what's been happening. And of course, this has been a great summer for Chicago airports, as we are seeing record-breaking activity with airlines scheduling nearly 17.8 million departing seats between June and August of this year. That's a 7% increase over last year and 4% jump from our record-breaking pre-pandemic levels in 2019. It's clear that travel to and from the city is not just back, but it's booming. O'Hare and Midway now connect travelers to approximately 265 destinations around the world. That's up from 250 just last summer, further cementing Chicago's position as a leading global aviation hub. And all of this is made possible thanks to the continued commitment of our hub carriers, American and United Airlines at O'Hare, and of course, Southwest Airlines at Midway. Earlier this year, American Airlines announced a major expansion at O'Hare with 25% more seats and 22% more departures scheduled for summer of 2025 compared to last summer, reaching an anticipated peak of 480 flights per day. The carrier also announced beginning in June, all service from O'Hare will be provided on larger dual-class aircraft to provide more travelers with the opportunity to fly in premium seats. United Airlines, our hometown airline, as well as our largest carrier at O'Hare, also announced this year that it will operate more seats out of Chicago in 2025 than at any point in the past 2 decades. And we have certainly seen the impact of that increase in service. According to the TSA, Sunday, June 20th, 2025, set a new record as the busiest day ever for passenger screening at O'Hare, with nearly 116,000 travelers passing through the city checkpoints in a single day. The previous record, roughly 114,000 passengers, was set just 2 weeks earlier on June 22nd, and with the third highest total of about 111,000 recorded only days before on June 19th. In fact, 7 of the 10 busiest days in O'Hare's history for passenger screening have occurred this summer alone, and it's a clear reflection of the unprecedented demand for travel through O'Hare International Airports. Our operations are surging as well. Between January 1st and June 30th, O'Hare handled 407,000 takeoffs and landings. That's a 10.4% increase over the same period last year. That's also 2% more than Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, which held the title of the world's busiest airport in 2024. So don't call it a comeback, but O'Hare may be on a track to reclaim that title for the first time since 2019, and that being the world's busiest airport. This growth underscores the aggressive recovery and network expansion by both United Airlines and American Airlines. There's also exciting new service on the horizon at O'Hare that passengers can look forward to. American began new daily stops nonstop between O'Hare and Madrid in March of 2025, and daily nonstop flights to Nepal, Italy in May of 2025. United extended its summer season service to Dublin, Ireland to year-round for the first time since 2025. First time in 2025. Japan Airlines began a daily flight between O'Hare and Tokyo Narita in June 2025, which complements the airline's existing daily service to Tokyo from Haneda. Aerojet, a low-fare Dominican airline, announced 3 flights a week between Punta Cana and O'Hare beginning in November 15th. The launch of service for Chicago is Aerojet's first route in the Midwest, a key stop in broadening the airline's reach beyond the East Coast. In July 2025, Turkish Airlines launched an additional seasonal flight from O'Hare to Istanbul, now bringing the total daily flights to 3, which is the highest frequency ever for this route. Service to Canada has also increased from carriers at O'Hare this year. United and WestJet launched services to Edmonton, while American and United launched services to Halifax. WestJet is also scheduled to operate the Calgary service year-round for the first time through the upcoming winter 2025-2026 season. And at Midway, Southwest Airlines continued to add to its already sizable number of destinations served by adding new services to Boise, Indianapolis, Palm Springs, and Spokane. In June 2025, saw Allegiant's largest ever departing seats from Midway in a single month. At the peak of its summer service schedule back in July, Allegiant served 6 nonstop destinations from Midway, up from 4 when it began to fly into Midway in May of 2020. All in all, this has been one of the most remarkable summers in the history of Chicago airports. It really has been. We're excited to build on the strong partnerships with our airline stakeholders as we continue to welcoming millions of travelers and proudly positioning Chicago not just as a destination, but as a world-class gateway to destinations across the globe. Thank you. Mayor.
Excuse me. Thank you again, Commissioner McMurray, for your leadership as our airports continue to set records and break records. It's another example of the vibrancy of our city, as well as what Kristen has indicated. You know, our RevPAR was up 5.4%, and we are the only city in America where that number has increased. Everywhere else, it's flat. You know, which is, you know, I would imagine for those cities, at least they're not losing ground, but we're the only place in America where we're actually gaining ground, setting records, breaking records. So I thank you both. And everyday Chicagoans might be wondering, you know, how does this impact their day-to-day, their life? Well, it's the revenue that we generate from these large events and visitors who come here that help fund our critical services. In fact, it's just an important note that, you know, just in July, we saw homicides reduce again, 35% decline, shootings down 26%, robberies down 36%. And, you know, we are continuing to make vital progress around public safety. And then finally, I want to clear up something really quick here. So yesterday, I was wearing my sunglasses, and I know a lot of folks were very excited about how powerful and good I looked. And I try to do that on a regular basis. But somehow, perhaps because I was wearing shades, someone thought I was throwing shade. But this is a tougher crowd than I thought. I was wearing shades, yes. Throwing shade, no. In all sincerity, though, look, we know the attack and the threat that's coming from the federal government. What Donald Trump is doing to America and this Constitution it's reprehensible. And, what the governor of Texas is doing at the behest of the president to gerrymander black and brown folks out of political power it's certainly on brand for them, but we have to stand up to this type of tyranny. I support the efforts of Governor Pritzker and Newsom and Hochul doing everything in their power to fight back. In fact, we need more of that, in fact. And, quite frankly, there's not I believe, executive in this country that knows how the iniquitous governing style of Governor Abbott has caused a great deal of consternation and terror and fear. And so I'm glad that folks are standing up to authoritarianism and standing up to the tyrannical style of governance that this president has put forward. In fact, I'm grateful that the governor is demonstrating leadership in this moment, especially as we continue to drive violence down on the city of Chicago. In fact, I don't know if there's a governor in this country that's been more supportive of some of the efforts that we put forward, like CVI, for instance, our community violence intervention workers, making sure that we're making critical investments and having these partnerships to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. We all have an opportunity to benefit from the vibrancy of our city. At the same time, though, we have to be absolutely clear that, parents woke up to a headline yesterday morning, Chicago Sun-Times, where it is calculated that the parents of this city are woefully underfunded as it relates to their children's public education. Like, that's a real serious challenge that we have, and so we have to do both and. We have to challenge the federal government to make sure that they're not administering harm, against people, and the city and the state have to continue to work together, like cities and states across America, to ensure that we're standing up for working people. And as a parent, as the leader of this city, the families of this city expect nothing less from me than to stand up to make sure that the $1.6 billion that our school district deserves, that we are owed, that we're doing everything in our power to secure those resources as well. And with that, we'll take questions.
Hi there, for the mayor. Hi, with WGN. Just curious, the deadline will be coming up soon for the first draft of the CPS budget. I think it's about a week away. Your thoughts and feelings on that? Do you think that they'll be able to make that August 28th was when the final draft will be due? Well,
we have to. The people of Chicago are counting on us to have a budget that reflects our values. Yesterday, as you know, we announced the expansion of sustainable community schools. This is a model that my hope is that we could take it district-wide, and that's what we're working towards. Look, there's no secret here that we have dealt with financial challenges for a long time in this city, particularly our public schools. And the new CEO that we have in place, she's rolled up her sleeves, the board president, also working with board members to ensure that the schools open with no harm to the classroom. These are very difficult and challenging moments, but it also points back to why we need all of us to come together, the city and the state, to ensure that the $1.6 billion based upon their calculation, the state's calculation, that those resources are delivered. And look, this is not just an issue that the largest school district is faced with. here in the state of Illinois. There are many districts across the state of Illinois that are also going to need the infusion of support. That's going to take a lot of courage and political will to do that, but it's a worthwhile investment in our young people. Yep. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
But no preamble today.
Mayor Johnson,
Straight to the question. Straight to the question.
I didn't even start the question. Interrupting me before I start a question is kind of a violation of my First Amendment rights. You know that, right? Mayor Johnson, you really should talk to your press secretary. I mean, it doesn't make you look strong to have them interrupting my questions. It really doesn't. Mayor Johnson, yesterday you took a very thinly veiled swipe at Governor Pritzker for prioritizing and harboring the Democrat lawmakers from Texas over the residents of the South and West Side. But yet, real people on the South and West Side contact me every day and say that they feel that your spending on migrants, putting Chicago in a $1 billion budget gap,
Time to get to the question.
has harmed them. What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, the investments that I will continue to make, particularly in communities that have been historically left out, we will continue to do that. $1.25 billion investment for housing and economic development. We just put forth another $40 million to expand and develop the infrastructure around homelessness. We've invested in over 30,000 summer youth jobs. We'll continue to make those investments. Look, the less than 1% over the overall budget that we responded to based upon the unholy and ungodly efforts and acts of the governor of Texas, we did the righteous thing by responding. It's very clear that we did the right thing responding to this mission because this is a governor in Texas that can't figure out, quite frankly, how to respond to natural disasters, right? This is a governor who is working hard to eliminate the power of black and brown people. I'm always going to stand up against those efforts, and as a city, we're going to continue to build the safest, most affordable big city in America.
National Democrats are pointing to you as an example of why the candidacy of New York Governor, mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani would be a disaster for New York and for the rest of the country. They say,
Question.
Mayor Johnson is proof that
We need the question.
not all
Yep.
grammar school
William.
social studies teachers are not qualified to run for mayor.
Okay.
Your
We're gonna need the question. We're
$1 billion
gonna have to keep moving.
budget deficit is an example of failed policies.
Okay,
What do
thank
you
you.
say to the national Democrat leaders who are pointing to you as an example of incompetence?
Yeah, 32% reduction in homicides, 38% reduction in shootings, 38% reduction in shooting victims. We have, some of the greatest numbers of airport interaction than we've seen ever in the history of our city. We have more people moving to the city of Chicago. We're on pace to build 10,000 more affordable units. Look, the city of Chicago has long been the punching bag of the extreme right. We know they have, but it's proof positive that we're.
All right, thank you.
I want to finish answering the question here. We are becoming the safest, most affordable big city in America, and that's because the investments that we're making in mental health, housing, youth employment, economic development. It is clear if you were awake during the presentation, you would actually know how effective my leadership has been. Next time, won't you do us a favor and at least not nod off when we're actually giving the real people that you talk to the evidence of how we're building the safest, most affordable big city in America. Thank you. And get a nap.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
With the signing of the police pension bill, putting more financial pressure on the city, will you go to the Illinois General Assembly and ask them to expand Chicago's home rule authority to give you power to implement taxes that they have so far, refused to consider, like a service tax, income tax, or even lifting the cap on property taxes for, CPS?
Yeah, thank you for that question. First of all, let me just say that my team worked extensively with the governor and the General Assembly around this particular piece of legislation. And we made it very clear that this legislation would certainly, make our situation far more difficult because of the fact that there wasn't any revenue attached to it. Of course, I'm going to continue to work with the governor and the General Assembly around progressive revenue that allows for us to meet our obligations while also making the critical investments in all of the services that people rely upon: public transportation, public education. Look, it is clear that our investments are working. Now, there's a lot more work for us to do. But as we continue to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, it's related to policing and affordable housing, policing and mental and behavioral health care services, policing and our education system being fully funded. All of this plays a part in driving violence down in the city of Chicago. So yes, we're going to continue to work with the General Assembly and the governor to make sure that we have revenue, progressive revenue, that allows for us to continue to make sure that we're showing up for working people.
On CPS's budget gap looming, would you ask Springfield to either lift the cap the district is subject to on property tax increases, or give the city the power to go to a referendum to ask voters to lift that cap?
Well, look, let's just start with, the fact that, as I said, I was just, looking at the headlines again in the Chicago Sun-Times. A $1.6 billion, budget gap, essentially, of what the state figures have shown of what they owe the people of Chicago. I mean, this is what people are talking about over the last 24 hours. There has to be a more concerted, aggressive effort to ensure that the families, particularly on the west and south sides of the city of Chicago, that have suffered from mass layoffs and school closures and disinvestment, that the fair share that the ultra-rich and our larger corporations have not shown up for the people of this state, this is a really, really good opportunity for them. And here's why. It's not just about the fact that the state owes our school district $1.6 billion. It's the fact that we have a president who is working overtime, literally, to undermine our public education system. We have to have some proof positive protections from the Trump taxes. The Trump taxes have shifted the largest concentration of wealth into the hands of the few, while working families are feeling uneased, perturbed, to be more specific, around the lack of full investment. So it's going to take all of us, because the threat from the White House is real and it's upon us, taking away food, medicine, and our education. These are real threats to our democracy. So it's going to require all of us to lean in to ensure that we find progressive revenue, and that, again, the $1.6 billion funding gap that families are suffering from already, that we can meet those demands.
So it doesn't sound like, just to clarify, it doesn't sound like home rule, expanding Chicago's home rule authority is part of your approach.
The state owes the city of Chicago $1.6 billion, and that's what families are counting on.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
The Springfield obviously is not going to come through with any type of money in the next 10 days. They're not going to hold a special session. So specifically, how do you close that gap? I mean, what are your specific ideas on how to close that CPS budget?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm working with our new CEO. She just got there a few weeks ago, our board president. We're having conversations with board members as well. We're talking with labor around a host of things. And, when all of those ideas have been worked through and that dollar amount has been identified, we'll be happy to offer up that presentation. But we're looking at multiple things. There's ways in which we can find some more efficiencies, particularly in central office, where there's some, layers of duplicity. And so we're going to work to cut some of those measures out. But really, the bottom line is still that whatever we do in this budget, it doesn't take away the fact that the state of Illinois has a responsibility and an obligation to work with me, to work with the Board of Education, to work with districts all over the state to ensure that the efforts that are coming from the White House, that they don't affect the everyday house of working people in this city.
I know you said you weren't throwing shade at the governor yesterday, but do you have regrets about your comment? And do you think it's going to hurt you trying to get more money for CPS or even a police pension when you obviously were, in a way, criticizing the governor yesterday about the Texas thing when you said, yeah.
Yeah, I think
you obviously felt a need today to explain yourself. So do you have regrets saying that? And do you think it's going to hurt you with your relationship with the governor trying to get more money for CPS?
Well, look, this is about offering clarification because there was some misunderstanding. Here's what I said. I appreciate the help and the support that's being offered to the members and leaders of Texas, particularly Democrats, especially Democrats. I do appreciate that work. Like, I understand it. Trust me, I do. When schools are being closed and public housing is being shut down, those were all efforts to diminish and eradicate political power, particularly for the west and south sides of the city of Chicago. I'm on record of that, of saying that. And so I support completely the efforts, as I said yesterday. I not only appreciate it, I support the efforts 100% of all of those governors, from Newsom to Hochul and to Governor Pritzker, for standing firm and strong in this moment. In fact, we need more of that in our fight. I've said that, whether it's to courts, whether it's policy, whether it's to streets. But make no mistake about it, it's $1.6 billion. These aren't my numbers. These are the state's numbers. Who's hurting ultimately here? There are 350,000 families that rely upon public education. And I believe as Democrats that we're all aligned when it comes to making sure that working people are properly serviced and supported. I mean, I'm always going to stand up for the people of Chicago. And I'm going to stand up against the vicious attack that's coming from the White House. And the governor and I and Democrats in Illinois were all aligned in defeating the ultra-right supremacist ideology that is coming to ultimately disrupt our democracy.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
On the Tier 2 pension bill, did your administration go as far as to ask the governor to veto it? And if not, could you describe a bit what efforts you did make to tweak or delay this bill?
Look, as you know, this bill was already baked and ready to be served in 2023. So we worked over the last couple of years trying to figure out a stronger pathway and mostly to find progressive revenue. I mean, I think everybody in this room knows that those votes were there when I was sworn in 2 years ago. Now look, my team has spoken extensively with the General Assembly and the governor's office around this obligation. And look, I get the position that the governor was in. It's a veto-proof majority. I mean, he was in a tough position. I understand that. You know, and I'm going to continue to work with the governor around ways in which we can generate the revenue to respond to pensions, transportation, education. Here, look, here's what I'm encouraged by. That I don't believe there's anyone in this state that wants to retreat from our responsibility to stand up for working people. I believe wholeheartedly that there are Democrats around the state who recognize our assignment in this moment. And I'm going to continue to lead the charge to stand up for working people. We're building a safe, affordable big city. You can obviously see the effects of our leadership in this moment. And it's good to have strong partners, and we're going to have to lock arms to ensure that working people and the families that rely upon government to work get the full support that they deserve and need.
And when you say that Democratic governors should do everything in their power to fight back, does that include Springfield potentially taking the time to redraw Illinois' maps, which the governor has said this week is on the table?
Good for him. It should be on the table. Look, I mean, all right, y'all know who I am. There's no secret here that I have stood up against some of the most vicious attacks that have come from the Trump administration. Our city was under attack for over 2 years. And this same governor who refused to cooperate with the Biden-Harris administration to respond to this crisis is now taking more orders from the tyrant. It's well past time that we roll up our sleeves and do whatever is necessary. Again, the courts, the Trump administration sued me and my administration. We beat them. The Trump administration is undermining our efforts to build more affordable homes. And so what do? We come up with green social housing. We have to do whatever is necessary to ensure that working people know that we have their back. And I will always stand up for working people. And as Democrats, this is a moment in history where we get to set the standard of not just what a fight back looks like, but what does a full comeback look like? As Mr. McMurray said, Commissioner McMurray, you got an airport that's, on the heels of becoming the most busiest airport in the country. We have hotel occupancy that's up. Tourism is up in our city. Violent crime is down in our city. The Cubs are in second place. Come on, Cubs. It's a good time to be a Chicagoan. It's a better time to be, a leader in this moment to ensure that people know that we're going to do everything necessary to make sure that working families are loved and seen and protected.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Going back to the pension bill, S&P today said that bill will worsen Chicago's financial condition. You've said that this budget season is going to be unlike any in Chicago history. What is the city going to do to find another $11 billion to pay into police and fire pensions? And are you worried that it could trigger another downgrade of the city's credit rating?
I know that we have to ensure that, our pensioners are supported. I think everyone agrees with that. And we've always said from the very beginning that we have to have revenue attached to any reform to pensions. That didn't happen this time. And, am I concerned? Of course I am. Do I believe that all hope is lost? No. And so, again, we worked hard and in a very extensive, intense way with the General Assembly and the sponsor of this effort. And I know the sponsor in particular, I'll name drop. Senator Martwick is aligned with me when it comes to finding progressive revenue. I know he's committed to that. He's a strong partner and believer of that endeavor. We have reached a point now where there's no return. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to do both and. Fight against the Trump administration, put forth a bold agenda that demonstrates to working people that even in the midst of this difficult season, that we can still come together collectively to ensure that working people are protected and that our values are on full display. There's no better time than now. And I can tell you that Chicagoans are counting on all of us to figure this out collectively.
Switching topics a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Two district councils are considering issuing no confidence votes in Commander John Foster of Area 5 detectives, citing his ties to the wrongful conviction of Kevin Jackson in a 2001 murder in Englewood. Are you comfortable having a police commander in charge of detectives in Area 5 who has ties to a wrongful conviction?
I would have to, look into that one more. Heather, to be perfectly frank with you, I'm not, aware of this particular incident. As you do know, though, and thank you for the covering of these challenges, that we've dealt with a number of incidents of which law enforcement did not live up to the standard of constitutional policing. Of course, I'll look into this, but of course I'm not ever going to be pleased with anyone who has the honor to serve and to protect to be aligned with any sort of breakdown around trust and confidence in law enforcement, especially at a time in which, we're seeing unprecedented numbers, essentially, right? As we continue to break records in the city, that it's going to be critical for our city moving forward to have absolute trust. But I would have to explore and look into this one, okay?
Hi, Mayor. Back to the budget. What happened to the pension working group that you created? At this time, roughly this time a year ago, your administration was saying a report would be released in the coming months, and it would include legislative recommendations on this exact Tier 2 bill that we're talking about. As far as I'm aware, nothing was released. The group's disbanded. What happened?
Well, what happened is that you had an untenable situation in Springfield in which, people were committed to moving forward with what was proposed. Now, again, we worked extensively within that group and even outside of the group to come up with a plan and a presentation that allowed for us to attach revenue to any bill that would, increase our responsibility. That didn't happen, and it's a disappointment. And we still need the revenue in order to be able to meet this responsibility.
When you say what your presentation was,
Well, look, the people who wanted it the way it was introduced 2 years ago, they wanted it to remain that way. And that's what ultimately passed. And look, they had the votes 2 years ago, right? And, unfortunately, it just didn't quite matter entirely about the predicament that it would put all of us in. But I do know that the sponsor is committed to working with me and his colleagues to generate progressive revenue for pensions, for CTA, for CPS. We're going to just focus on that work right now.
did the group get as far as advocating for a specific revenue source for these costs, or was it general?
Thank you for that question, Justin. There were a number of ideas that were on the table, some of which will be debated and discussed in the coming months. And we have reached a point of no return. The systems that people rely upon, education, healthcare, housing, our transportation, they are woefully underfunded, and everyone knows that. Everyone knows what my commitment is to progressive revenue. I can't do this by myself. Other folks have to lean in to get a substantive revenue package across the finish line. Now, I'm going to work hard to model that locally. You'll get a chance to see my presentation soon enough, and I just hope that my counterparts at the state level continue to explore all options. And there are a number of people who recognize the severity of this moment. I don't want that to be lost or misunderstood or misinterpreted. That I know that there are a number of my counterparts in Springfield that recognize the urgency of this moment. Now it's just a matter of us using the political will that really the working people have bestowed upon us to execute a budget package that speaks to our values and funds our critical services.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yesterday, Deputy DK's Commissioner Sangini Brahmbhatt was, according to our sources, abruptly fired with, quote, the trademark cruelty of Commissioner Clinay Hedspeth, who is the subject of multiple abuse allegations for doing, among other things, cursing out staff in staff meetings until they cry. She's lost now 25 of her employees, including most of her senior staff. In April, a letter was sent to you by 200 members of the arts community asking if you will address these allegations, but I believe
Can we get to the question?
They still do not have a response. Will you respond to these allegations of abuse?
I don't discuss personnel issues. I believe everybody knows that. And I will, maintain, my commitment to the arts community. We continue to make critical investments that have not been made in a very long time, and in some instances, ever. And, our deputy mayor is here. If you want to speak to some of those investments that we've made within the art community, that's what our focus is going to remain. And again, I don't discuss personnel issues.
Sure, and I'll just add some of the investments that this mayor has made in the current budget is additional funding to help offset some of the losses that many of our arts organizations have experienced at the federal level. And so the mayor has doubled down on his commitment to not only supporting local artists, but also our arts organizations here in the city.
When I asked Chief of Staff Christina Pasion-Izayas about these abuse complaints, she said, Ms. Merritt, that you're the person who's overseeing that department. And I asked if she was aware of the abuse complaints. She said, you need to ask Kenya Merritt. Are you aware of the abuse complaints that have been filed with Inspector General?
Yeah, and as the mayor stated, we don't talk about personnel matters.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Monica.
Afternoon. So last month, U.S. Senator Dick Durbin announced that there's a very strong possibility that Roseland Community Hospital might close behind these Trump cuts to Medicaid and other health funding. And since then, there's been some indication that St. Bernard's might follow the same route. What steps or preparation is the city taking to avert this potentially in conjunction with the county?
Yeah, this is a grave concern for all of us, and thank you for lifting up the county as well. I've had multiple conversations with President Preckwinkle. Our team is in communication with one another to figure that out. These are unprecedented times. The President of the United States of America, as you indicated, whether it's medicine and healthcare, food, education, anything and everything that working people and poor people in particular rely upon as it relates to government services, he has literally taken all of those dollars and shifted them into the hands of the ultra-rich. It's a deeply, deeply troubling moment. And so we're looking at a number of options that we can take in the meantime to be able to mitigate the potential harm against families who rely upon our healthcare systems. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, I don't believe anybody will disagree with me in that regard, but we are working together to figure out measures that we can take locally to be able to stop some of that harm from reaching all the way through our communities.
But no plan is arising at this time.
I mean, as I said, there is a plan that's being developed, and again, these are unprecedented times. I mean, you have a president who's literally trampling over the Constitution, where he doesn't have the legal authority, but the courts have decided to work against their own guidelines. And, this is why I believe that the fight that we are in right now, we have to be far more audacious and bold, because our challenge and the threats are real and severe. I can say this, the ultimate plan is to protect as many working people as we possibly can from the hands of a tyrant.
Okay. And I'm sure you heard about the kerfuffle from this past weekend with Alderman Hall trying to shut down a illegal, or what he says was an illegal scrap metal processing business. To the point that he was on YouTube doing a rant on the facility, and the workers were going about their merry way, keeping to their business and literally ignoring him before he eventually got the business shut down. So the question is, what outside of automatic prerogative, what is the city doing to police these type of illegal businesses, especially with undocumented workers? And keep in line with your
Thanks.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's why we looked at each other. Let me just say, first things first, I'm going to pass it over to our deputy mayor. Within buildings, within business and consumer protection, BACP, remember all these different entities of government, we are in constant mode of protection. But Deputy Mayor, if you want to speak to.
And so I'll just add, in terms of businesses that present challenges in our community, we approach it two ways. One, to your point around the worker aspect, we have a robust Office of Labor Standards, where workers can call in and share concerns with a particular company. In addition to that, we have a team that is charged with ensuring that businesses are following the rules and that they're compliant. But beyond that, when there are issues, we do work really closely between multiple departments, the whole force of government, including the Chicago Police Department, Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, as well as others, to ensure businesses are showing up the right way in our neighborhoods.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
As your administration crafts the 2026 budget, are you exploring any potential new revenue sources among those gains in large events and air travel that were highlighted today? Or is that something that could potentially stifle those gains?
Well, clearly, let me just say that we have not done anything to stifle those gains, right? So let's just acknowledge that as the most pro-worker city in America, it turns out you can be pro-worker and pro-business. Mm-hmm. This is proof positive of that. And so I just want to just dismantle this notion that somehow our city is hostile or inimical towards the interests of the business community. What I've always said is that we are open for business, but we're just not for sale. Like, we have to do everything in our power to ensure that the workforce grows. That's how our economy grows. I am a pro-growth mayor. I actually believe that in order for us to have the type of growth that we're experiencing, you got to make sure that people actually want to live and work here and feel safe. That's the first thing, because that's what the business community continues to ask me. The reason why we're seeing growth is because we're making the necessary investments to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. And we are on pace to be the safest, most affordable big city in America. A lot of work to be done, but we're not afraid of it. You know, as far as measures or proposals that we're going to put forward, we have an entire working group, business leaders, philanthropic leaders, labor leaders, political leaders that are going to come to me with some recommendations. I'm going to take them seriously. Yes, I'm going to put forth a package that people can assess and debate. As you know, though it was misrepresented, City Council provided me with ideas, of which my finance team went through the numbers, calculated the numbers, and then presented it back to the individuals who presented them to me. I have not made a formal presentation yet, but I can assure you one thing, though. I am committed to making sure that the ultra-rich and those with means put more skin in the game. That is the pathway forward. As long as there's a $1.6 billion payment that the city of Chicago is due, as long as there are families who are struggling to make the ends meet, as long as there are families who are relying upon our public transportation system but feel uncertain because of the cuts that are looming, I'm going to continue to advocate and fight for the interests of every single Chicagoan. And so I just think it's important that we gather ourselves and not play into the hands of those who want to divide us. Pro-business, pro-growth, pro-worker, proof positive, and my presentation and my package will reflect that.
And can you give an update on the city's bid process for new gun violence detection technology? And with shootings down, does your administration still intend to contract with a new company?
Well, I'm supportive of things at work, right? I've always said that I've been open, to a conversation around how we can advance and improve how we deliver community safety. I've made the case. The case has been made. The results are very clear. 32% reduction in homicides, 38% reduction in shootings and shooting victims. Robberies are down as well. And with the revamping of our detectives division, we are seeing some of the highest clearance rates than we've seen in over a decade. Right? I believe the last number that I received from our constitutional policing presentation was about 77% of our cases have been cleared. We see that as a deterrent, right? Rolling up our sleeves, concentrating on the efforts that actually work. Now, again, if someone presents something to the city of Chicago that drives us towards building the safest, most affordable big city, I'll explore it. But at least there's proof and evidence that in many of the areas in which technology used to exist, removing that technology did not prevent us from lowering crime in those areas. So again, that's what I've always said. It has to work. Because we're actually driving violence down in some of the very areas where that particular form of technology existed, which I won't name it, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. It is evident, though, that it being there, or not being there rather, would be a detriment, if you will, to the overall safety of our city. It has to work. That's the bottom line for me, because clearly the work that we're doing right now is working.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey, Jake.
SCIU Local 1 criticized you for the layoff of 1,200 janitors and accused you of, quote, balancing the budget off of longtime, hardworking custodians. What's your response to that criticism? Why do you think that was the right place for cuts?
Well, look, those are the cuts that were put in place by the previous CEO, period, point blank. I am doing everything in my power to ensure that our school district is fully funded. Now, the previous administration, or the CEO, said that it was a $200 million deficit. Then it was $500 million, then back to $200 million. The interim CEO, put real eyes on the situation, and that number is 734. Those cuts were already put in place by the previous CEO. And unfortunately, because we didn't have cooperation from the previous leadership, we're in the predicament that we're in now.
Just to clarify, you mean put in place by the previous CEO?
The budget that we're dealing with right now is the budget that was put together by the previous CEO, in which those cuts were expressed. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the problem, though, is that now we're in a situation where we have to figure it out. Now, I'm going to do everything in my power to figure it out. And this is the problem, the challenge, when you have individuals who are more interested in their next job than doing the current one.
You celebrated the sustainable schools expansion. How much did that cost, and why do you think it makes sense to add spending there while cuts are going on with janitors, with crossing guards, and other spaces?
Well, look, the most important thing to note is I don't want to see any cuts to the classroom. And I want to make sure that the investments that we're making are working. This one is working. So it's not about one over the other. It's really about ensuring that our children get the high quality education that they deserve. This is about a world-class city providing a world-class education. The Sustainable Community Schools model is the model for the future. Remember, we're coming out of an era of privatization, school closures, the dismantling of the workforce. Now we're moving in a direction where the community actually gets to play a part in the overall direction of how a school shows up for that particular community. Don't you think that's a worthwhile investment to ensure that parents are empowered in the direction of their child's education? Don't you think that's the best type of investment where children actually receive full wraparound services, particularly in neighborhoods where trauma is quite pervasive and rampant? Do you know that when doctors are being prepared for war, they send those doctors to hospitals in Black communities in particular? Because the type of trauma that those doctors are going to experience in war-torn countries, that's the type of trauma they're going to see in Black communities. Right? And so these circumstances and conditions in which too many people are living in, I don't want people to take this lightly and for granted. That to question our investment in communities that have been historically disinvested in, I actually find that to be, quite frankly, if I'm being dishonest, I actually find it to be appalling. We should never question when we're investing in people who are barely breaking even every single day. The cumulative wealth of Black folks is $0, and people are questioning whether or not we should invest in those communities. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't ever ask a question. I'm just simply saying, understand the logic here. Disinvestment, trauma, crime. Investment, healthy, whole, and safe. I want healthy, whole, and safe. And that requires me to invest in those communities. So I'm going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to work with the state of Illinois to make sure that this headline one day reads that the state of Illinois showed up for the people of Chicago with $1.6 billion. I thank you all. Good job, Kristen.